At midnight, a boy named Robert went up the mountain to hunt. There, in an open clearing, he found a strange object glowing with a blue light like a stone. Cautiously, he picked it up, studied it closely, and even blew on it, trying to figure out its secret. Not realizing its true worth, he rushed to the butcher's shop that very night, hoping to trade the blue stone for some fresh meat. The shopkeeper was immediately mesmerized by the stone, but he quickly asked Robert where he had found it. When he learned that the stone came from the far hills, the shopkeeper's expression changed. He handed the stone back at once and warned, "Those hills belong to the king. If the stone isn't returned, the entire village will suffer." With that, he drove Robert out of the shop. Outside, Robert saw soldiers questioning people everywhere. This convinced him even more that the stone was no ordinary rock. It must be a priceless treasure. To escape the soldiers, he fled the village and went to stay with his uncle in the countryside. His uncle gave him shelter. There, Robert took out the stone and examined it again. It was hollow inside, which only deepened his curiosity. That night, when he returned, he saw the stone moving on its own. He stared at it intently, and suddenly, the stone burst open. From within emerged a blue dragon. Robert was overjoyed at the sight. The tiny dragon staggered toward him, then suddenly spread its wings and startled him. But moments later, the dragon looked at him with curious eyes. Gathering courage, Robert reached out his hand. The instant he touched the dragon, he collapsed unconscious. When he awoke, the dragon was lying in his lap, and a mysterious mark had appeared on his hand. At the sound of his uncle's voice, the dragon darted to the side in fear. Robert tried to feed it milk from a pouch, but the dragon showed no interest. Instead, in the blink of an eye, it leapt forward, caught a rat, and devoured it. That's when Robert realized this was a carnivorous dragon. He raised the dragon with care, teaching it how to fly. Within days, it was soaring through the skies. But then, the mark on Robert's hand began to glow. Amid thunder and lightning, the dragon transformed, growing into a gigantic beast hundreds of meters long. It descended before Robert, now able to understand him and communicate telepathically. The dragon revealed its name, Saphira. Robert was now its one and only rider. But the greater mystery remained. Why had the dragon awakened in this age of peace? Saphira explained. Thousands of years ago, there was a great struggle for power. Back then, every human had their own dragon. Dragons were deeply bound to mankind. But greed for power turned humans against each other. Out of the chaos rose a bald warrior, the strongest of them all. He conquered and ruled the entire continent. The bald warrior finally became king. Those who disobeyed him were hunted down and driven into the deep mountain prisons. He stationed his followers, the fire mage and the archers, along the path in ambush. The sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder. With a signal from the fire mage, 2 soldiers collapsed on the spot. Even the lone surviving woman was surrounded by flames conjured by the mage. But he did not kill her outright, for she carried with her the last dragon's egg. The mage chanted a spell, and the egg suddenly appeared before a boy who had gone out hunting. This very egg was destined to change the man's fate. One day, the man reached a bend in the street. There he saw the butcher being tortured by shadow beings. Right before his eyes, the butcher was brutally slain after revealing his address. Fortunately, the man had hidden beneath the table. Otherwise, he too would have been killed. As soon as the shadow beings left, he rushed home, desperate to warn his uncle to escape. But just then, a dragon appeared, seized him, and soared into the sky. The dragon said, "The shadow beings move far swifter than you think. Returning is useless now." But the man stubbornly insisted on going back home. At last, the dragon dropped him onto a haystack. He ran home, only to be stunned by the sight before him. His uncle lay cold and lifeless on the ground. The man screamed and wept in despair, stumbling outside. At that moment, one of the dragon's massive claws pushed a boulder into the abyss. The man froze in terror. Thankfully, he himself had not fallen. Robert then swore to capture the shadow beings. He mounted the dragon, gripping it tightly, and together they soared across mountains and rivers. Before long, the dragon climbed to the heights of the sky. The man chanted a spell and merged his vision with the dragon's. Now the world before his eyes shifted in colors, the landscapes appearing grander than ever. Overjoyed, he spread his arms wide. But then, through the dragon's sight, he saw 2 shadow beings closing in on his companions below. At once, he and the dragon dove down. But in his haste, the man made a mistake. He forgot the dragon's limits and left himself vulnerable to the shadow's attack. The man crashed to the ground. The shadow beings nearly caught him, but he used the magic he had learned, trapping them in the branches of a tree. Yet the dragon lost balance and slammed into the earth with great force. Its colossal body was gravely wounded. The man rushed toward it when suddenly another shadow being emerged. Helpless, he braced himself, but just in time, another warrior appeared and saved him. A fierce battle erupted between them. Each strike was deadly, yet at last, the warrior in the blue cloak triumphed. With perfect timing, he drove his sword deep into the enemy's heart. The shadow's body turned to ash, and the battle was over. Robert was left in shock, but instead of speaking, they tended to the injured dragon. The blue-cloaked warrior, whose name was Sola, said, Cherish your dragon. Do not be so reckless again. Robert looked upon his dragon with guilt. Then Sola went to the riverbank to wash his hands. Robert followed him. He cut across Sola's arm with a blade, revealing a mark in his palm, the symbol of a dragon rider. Robert was overjoyed to realize that the man before him was like an ancestor to him, but the dragon grew uneasy. Sola did not wish to speak much of his past, but the man kept pressing him with questions. Finally, Sola drew his sword and began to recount his past. He was a dragon rider, but his mighty dragon was slain by another rider. Burning with vengeance, he seized that rider's sword and struck him down. I entered his heart. When he died, his dragon perished as well. In the end, nothing was left to him but the palace, so I left with him. From that day onward, Sola was drowned in deep guilt. Then came Robert, whose arrival rekindled in his heart the hope of defeating the king. Meanwhile, the fire mage, seeking to capture Robert, used a woman who could enter dreams through the dragon orbs. She slipped into Robert's dreams, trying to lure him into walking into their trap himself. In the dream, a woman's voice echoed, "I am Maimakin. I am Arena, Queen of Mima. You are my only protector. Only you can save me." The moment Robert awoke, he began gathering his clothes and prepared to leave. Though Sola tried to stop him again and again, Robert paid no heed. He shoved Sola aside and walked straight toward the dragon. Sola pleaded with him, but Robert would not listen. He turned to the dragon and declared, "I am your rider. Let's go." The dragon, unwilling yet compelled, spread its wings and soared, for the princess was in grave danger. Driven by the desperation to save her, Robert soon reached the dungeon where she was imprisoned. He told the dragon, "I'll go alone. A lone man is a smaller target. Your massive body will give us away." Saying this, he slipped inside unseen. Once in a chamber, he used the dragon's vision to locate the princess. A ripple of energy swept across, and there she was, in the very room. He twisted the lock open and rushed inside. Running to her side, he was met by the princess's urgent cry, "Go, run from here." But Robert refused to leave her. He stood his ground, unwilling to abandon her. Just then, the fire mage appeared behind him, sneering, "Fool, you've walked into my trap so easily." Furious, Robert lunged with his sword, but the mage slipped aside in the blink of an eye. The mage raised both hands and began chanting. As his arms lifted above his head, the iron tools nearby trembled, then hurtled toward Robert. By fortune, Robert escaped. The mage prepared to chant again, but in a sudden strike, Robert shattered his spell. Even Robert himself was stunned at what he'd done. The truth was, the mage was secretly controlling the sword. By the time Robert realized it, it was too late. The blade floated in the air, then sped straight toward him. Sola leapt in and saved him, but took a grievous wound. As is often the way of villains, they perish by their own arrogance. Just as the mage was about to unleash his final attack, Robert shot an arrow into his head, and the mage slowly dissolved into nothingness. With his vanishing, the princess awoke from her trance. But Robert wasted no time. He lifted Sola and ran out. On the way, he fought like an angel, but as the soldiers multiplied, they became surrounded. By luck, the dragon arrived just then. Soldiers were crushed under massive stones. Others were hurled by its mighty tail, and many were swallowed whole. At last, through their fierce teamwork, they mounted the dragon's back and took flight into the skies. After several hours of flight, they finally reached a safe zone. But Sola, having lost too much blood, grew extremely weak. When he realized that his days were numbered, he drew out his sword and handed it to Robert. With grave seriousness, he taught him what it meant to be a true dragon rider and warned him that he must one day overthrow the cruel king's reign. Robert could not shake off the thought that it was because of him his master had died. Racked with guilt, tears streamed down his face. He stretched out his hand and tried to heal Sola with a magical spell, but the wound was too deep. Even after pouring all his strength into it, he could not heal him in the slightest. To give his master a dignified farewell, Robert built a stone monument upon his grave. Then, the mighty dragon breathed a single breath of cold, nectar-like air over it, encasing the tomb in ice so that it would remain eternal. The dragon then bowed its head in tribute. Once the rites were complete, they set out on a journey to take revenge against the king. Robert was the only dragon rider alive who could truly stand against a dragon. Once, in a light-hearted exchange with the beast, a careless joke earned him a fireball straight to his side. But instead of being angry, Robert laughed, for it was a sign that the dragon had accepted him as its comrade in the coming great war. Now, he could truly mount the dragon and fight alongside it. The moment they entered the battlefield, where once only swords and spears clashed, the dragon's flames swept across the enemy ranks, sending their army scattering. But before they could even celebrate, another massive enemy force emerged from the mist. Clad in iron armor and armed with heavy weapons, they encircled the rebels and unleashed a storm of arrows. And to everyone's horror, the fire sorcerer, long thought dead, returned, resurrected, and took command of the army. Even so, with the dragon on their side, the balance of battle began to tip once more. The dragon's fiery breath turned the tide, but the fire sorcerer would not relent. Grinding his teeth, he raised both hands and began to weave a spell. In an instant, flames surged into the sky, away from danger, so they could find the right moment to strike back. From above, Robert observed the battlefield carefully, studying the sorcerer's movements. At last, when the sorcerer was momentarily drained from casting his fiery spell, Robert seized the chance. With a mighty lash of the dragon's tail, Robert drove his sword straight through the sorcerer's body. The black dragon shattered and vanished in an instant. Robert struck again, and the fire sorcerer disintegrated into ash, scattered by the wind. Robert nearly fell from the sky, but the dragon caught him just in time. Even so, the dragon was gravely wounded and crashed down to the ground. Though Robert was unharmed, his heart sank at the sight of his companion bleeding out. With the last of his strength, he healed the dragon before collapsing into unconsciousness. Meanwhile, the rest of the battle reached its end, and Robert's side emerged victorious. He was carried back for treatment, and the dragon too recovered in time. At last, having defeated the king, Robert became the world's only surviving dragon rider.